Hey, Slider Crusaders. So the San Diego library system wants to eliminate overdue book fines. So no more fines if you don't return a book. To which every person watching and listening says, well, then why would anyone ever return a book? Well, we got to do it to help the poor. This is the headline in our local paper. San Diego may eliminate library fines to avoid cutting off poor. Everything about that headline is wrong. The library is not cutting off the poor. A person is cutting themselves off from having access to the library because they're not playing by the rules. And the rules are very simple, by the way. Don't know if you've been to a library before. You go and you get to take out this book for free, for months, totally, completely free. And all you have to do is bring it back before the due date. This is not a super high expectation to have of people. And if you don't abide by these rules, then you cut off your own access to the library. That's your doing. The library says more poor people have overdue book fines, and the fines prevent them from going back to the library. I don't buy that. If you're wealthy enough to borrow a book from the library, how can you be too poor to return it? Right? If you're able to go to the library and get a book, then you're also able and competent enough to go to the library and bring it back. If the argument was that poor people, they can't get to the library, or there's not enough library locations in poor neighborhoods or near bus routes or within walking distance of people, okay, I'd like to see the data. That's interesting. Okay, I can hear that. But you can't say that people are too poor to return a book. They weren't poor enough to borrow it in the first place. I don't buy that for a second. So there's a couple of reasons why I'm against this and a little more passionate than you would think. First, if no one returns the book now, they're not going to do it when there's no fines. And that reduces access for me to the library. Right? So catering to someone who's not following the rules, it hurts people like me who do follow the rules. Because now there may not be the book that I want to read. They're reducing my access. And also when people, never return a book, it's higher taxes that we're all going to have to pay to replenish the book supply and all that. But here's my main frustration. I get annoyed when people remove all personal responsibility and agency from a situation. Right? We're living in a society with zero personal responsibility. Again, the library says the fines cut off people, cut off poor people. No. Someone who doesn't follow the rules cuts off their own access. That's them. That's on them. The library is not cutting anyone off. They're cutting themselves off. There's just this coddling, really specifically here, of the poor. It's the victimization of the poor. When anything, this is evidence probably why people are poor to begin with. Many poor people are poor because they make bad decisions with money and they make bad life decisions often. There's a book, Hillbilly Elegy, super popular a couple years ago. It was about a guy who grew up in rural Kentucky and rural Ohio, hillbilly country. And then he went on to the Marines and then Yale Law School. So he lived in two very different cultures in his life. He wrote about working at a tile factory growing up in Ohio. And there was one employee who was so horrible, he would take 3 or 4 bathroom breaks every day, each one over an hour. And everyone would set a timer and they'd take bets on how long he'd be gone on his bathroom break. And that's when he did show up for work. He was fired, obviously. This was after his girlfriend was fired from the same location, the same business as a secretary because she missed work every 3rd day without giving any notice. So she was fired and then he was fired. And when he was fired, he attacked the manager and said, "How could you do this to me? Don't you know that I have a pregnant girlfriend?" Right? So he thought that getting fired was something that was done to him. Just a complete lack of agency and personal responsibility. Right? The manager's firing him? No, he was a terrible employee. And I think it's the same thing with library fines. We don't expect poor people to follow basic rules? Come on. We don't expect a poor person to be able to return a library book after a few months after borrowing it? How insulting, honestly, is that to a poor person? And this is what's so funny, and this is why I get angry at this. I'm the insensitive person here for some reason, because I say, hey, poor person, you're fully capable of returning a library book on time. You can do this. You were capable of borrowing the book, and I'm glad you did. You're capable of bringing it back. That makes me the bad person. But the person over here, the bleeding heart liberal who says, oh, poor person, you're so pathetic. You're so weak. You are incapable. you can't do this. We can't expect you to. It's okay. No more fines for you. That's the caring and compassionate person? Are you kidding me? The person's horribly insulting. But I'm the bad guy. Back to the main point. Could it be true that many people are poor because they don't show up to work on time? They're just not good employees. Talk to any manufacturer in any industry, and they'll talk about, taxes are too high and regulations and all this stuff. But one of the hardest things about being in business, they'll tell you, is finding good employees. People who will show up on time, pass a drug test, and not steal from me. Steal things or time. It's hard to find just that bare minimum of people. It's because people make bad choices. Many people make bad choices. Don't rob them of their agency. Because if you tell someone that their bad choices aren't their fault, then really what you're telling them is that they're not capable of ever making good choices. And they'll never get better if you do that. If anything, a library fine should go up. Right now it's 30 cents. It should be $30 a day. But really, ideally, we got to get back to a society where people bring books back right away just because it's the decent thing to do and it's a common courtesy to others. That's a virtuous society, but goodness gracious, look how far we've fallen.